This video will go over the Vienna Gambit, which is e4, e5, knight c3, knight f6, and now this move f4. Now f4 aims to immediately challenge the pawn that black has in the center and really weaken the control that black has in the center. Now, black can of course take it, but as with any other gambit, black can also decline it with something like knight c6 or d6 to defend this pawn in the center, or even this move d5, which aims to counterattack in the center. We'll be looking at all of these moves that I just mentioned, but let's start with what happens if black plays the most obvious continuation by simply taking the pawn. Now, the first thing to notice is that although this is currently a pawn sacrifice, very often you're going to win this pawn back because of two reasons. A, this bishop is immediately aiming at this pawn, so once you move your d-pawn forward, this pawn will be under attack. And also, it's really awkward and challenging for black to really hold on to this pawn. They're either going to have to make a lot of weaknesses on their king side with something like g5, or they're just going to have to give you the pawn back. But regardless of whether or not you win the pawn back, you're going to get a lot of compensation in other ways. So here you're going to get the center, as you will see. In fact, here you can already push e5. You're also going to get very easy development for your pieces, and therefore a very quick way to get your king to safety, either by castling long or by castling short. And then you're also going to see that you're really pushing black's pieces backwards. You're getting a lot of space, and you're removing a lot of the control that black has on the board. And so here immediately e5 is the move that you should be playing, kicking away the knight. And as you might notice, this knight actually has no forward moves. It has to go back to g8 because of the control you have with your knight and your queen here, controlling all of the knight squares. Now, the one little trick you might fall into is if you play, for example, d4 here, which is natural, looking to take the pawn, but then queen h4 hits. And because of this pawn here on f4, g3 is not as effective as it seems, and you're probably just going to have to move your king away, and this is not what you want to do. You want to be attacking in this opening, not defending. Therefore, the one thing you should understand is that whenever this queen eyes down h4, make sure that you play this move knight f3. So, right, they moved their knight away, therefore their queen attacks h4, so just start by playing knight f3, a move that you're going to play anyways, and then later continue with d4, taking the pawn, and continue by developing your other pieces and castling. And so here, if they were to play d6, which seems like the most challenging move for them, because then they're trying to get more control in the center, but then d4 comes, and after they take, you don't even have to take back here. If you take with the knight, you lose your control on h4. If you take with the pawn, you're trading queens, which is not what you want to do here. So queen to e2 is actually a very strong idea here. Pinning this knight, pinning the pawn here to the king. And now you're prepared to take on f4, again because of the pin. You're also prepared to take back here on e5, castle, regain all of your material, and then even start to attack. And what you'll notice is that black has some forward pawns here, but you're going to take them, and other than that, black has nothing. All of their pieces are on the back rank, whereas you have some nice development going. So here, knight c6 makes sense, but then you take on f4, they develop their bishop, you can even castle here. You don't need to rush into taking here, especially while the king is in the center. Let's just get it safe. Now, they might think that they're doing something after this exchange here, weakening your king a little bit, but it really is not important in this position here, because clearly the action right now is going to be on you attacking black, right? They don't have the forces to attack your weak king, whereas you indeed have all of your forces attacking their pieces. And so here, if they were to try to castle by playing knight e7 and then looking to castle, but then d takes on e5, and they're just a little too slow here because of this attack on the queen, they have to block with their bishop. But then this really kind of thematic idea here, e6, a really brilliant idea, because if they were to take with the pawn, of course, they cannot take with the bishop because of the pin, so they take with the pawn, but then knight g5 is strong, and you're just piling up pieces on them while they're very kind of stuck here. You're also weakening this diagonal, something that you might be looking to use later on in the game. Now here, you're of course threatening to simply take here, which is a really scary idea for black, So they play queen to c8, getting out of the pin and also defending more on e6. But then you can finally sacrifice here on d7, and after they take, knight takes on e6. You're threatening this pawn, but more urgently, you're threatening this fork here. So they kind of have to move their king. Notice they cannot castle because of the way your knight here is controlling squares next to the king. So they have to go to f7. Then you can take anyways on c7. They move their rook, bring the queen into the attack on h5, bring the bishop into the attack on c4. And here, I mean, it's mating. Really, any move, any sequence you do, as long as it's checks, is probably going to be checkmate here. It's just a really fun position to play, as this king is completely in the center of the board, actually on e4. And so you can see here how quickly you can attack in this gambit here, and that's all because you open up your lines and files for your pieces super quickly here. And so this is kind of what happens if they were to take, and you can see that very quickly this goes downhill for them, which is why very often they're going to try to kind of support this pawn in a really passive manner, something like d6 here. But then the thing to understand, if they were to ever take, this would just transpose into something we've already seen, right? Then we move over here, we take. I mean, it's not an issue if they were to take at a later time. So therefore, we don't want to rush into taking or pushing. We simply develop our knight. Then we can simply kick away their bishop. And again, if they were to ever take, you play d4, a super strong center. You can take their pawn, you can castle long, or even here, if you wanted to, it's totally fine developing your bishop and then trying to castle and more, control more of this f-file and attack over here. You could even develop the c4, and then there's going to be problems perhaps on f7 once your rook joins the attack. So there's many ways to take this. It's kind of depends on your personal opinion on how you want to attack here, but castling long is also good, and then you can perhaps start pushing these pawns here without weakening your king. So they develop. You can go for e5. Again, attacking the queen. They have to go knight to d7 here, because otherwise, their knight was attacked and their queen was attacked, so they have to save both. But then queen to g4 comes. You're attacking the knight. They really can't defend it. Something like knight to b8 is way too passive. So here they're going to have to sacrifice some material with knight takes on e5. You can take back. Notice bishop f6, you can simply take. Because of this pin, they cannot take back with the knight. And then something like f6, you can simply bring your queen in. And I mean, you're totally crushing here. Any idea here for you wins. Develop the bishop, push your pawns forward, open up this h-file, maybe move your rook over to a different file as well. Anything you want to do here is perfectly fine. And so again, you can see how quickly you start to attack along these files here in the center. Now let's look at what happens if instead they defend with their knight, for example, with c6. Now in this case, you do want to take. Why? Because then their knight hops onto e5 and you win tempo with this move d4. And now you have a really strong center. You still have this open f-file, and simply something like e5 here. Again, now the knight moved. They have access to h4, so let's stop that with knight f3. Then you develop your bishop to c4, for example. You can even castle, giving away a pawn, and now knight to g5. And you see how quickly you can attack regardless of how you castled. We saw some examples of castling long, how you can attack in those cases, but castling short indeed is also going to be a really strong attack on this f-file, and they're already here completely busted. Something like knight h6 doesn't help. You have too many attackers, so knight takes on f7. They can develop their bishop, but then you take their knight. They can't castle anymore, really, because their position is way too open. And I mean, there's checkmate here, but even if you don't find it, really any move wins. You can bring the other rook in, you can bring the knight in, whatever you want to do. It's gonna end pretty badly for black here. And so you can see again how quickly you can attack in this opening. And this is truly an aggressive opening. And the thing to notice, it's not really risky because it's not an opening where you're attacking them, but they also have chances to attack you. As long as you cover this h4 square, they really cannot attack you that easily. And especially in the opening. Later on, of course, if your attack fails, they'll be able to attack you, but in this opening stage, you're the one with all the initiative, all the attacking chances. And then to end off the video, let's look at their best option actually, which is this move d5, trying to counterattack and grab some initiative. Now you have two options here. F takes on e5 and E takes on d5. Taking on e5 is more common and more popular, but taking on d5 is equally good, perhaps even better. It's just a little bit more scary. So let's look at what happens if you do either one of these, and then you can decide which you want to play. So E takes on d5, they take back, then you take on e5, and then their queen comes to h4. So the downside here is you really can't develop your knight, and you allow their queen to come to h4. Now here you continue with g3. Notice your knight is guarding on e4, so they don't have this fork that is pretty common. And instead they're going to take your knight here. Now in this position, be careful, don't take their knight back, because if you do, this fork will be possible. Instead you take their queen, they take your queen, you take their knight. Positionally, you have some weaknesses, especially with these pawns, but then again, you also have some pretty big positives. You have very nice and natural development, tons of control in the center. I mean, your rooks will find practically any one of these open or semi-open files that you can use, and you just have really easy development and still really good attacking chances. I mean, f7 is still pretty weak. You can get a rook in there, you can get a knight into g5 here and also attack. So attacking chances are not gone when the queens are traded, especially in this position when they have this clear weakness here and you have a really easy development to attack it. And so if you want this sort of endgame, you can go for that. But alternatively, it's totally fine to take here on e5 instead. And the positions you'll reach after that is knight takes on e4. Now here I should mention you could play this move queen f3. If you want, you can study it a bit more. I personally prefer this move knight f3, which we'll look at in a second. Queen f3 is also fine. It takes away the square from the knight, but in exchange you do get some possible attacking chances, and you of course immediately attack in the center here. Now if they were to take, you take with the b pawn, and you continue with playing d4. You have a really solid center, you have good attacking chances, you can even pin their knight if it comes here. So something can continue like knight to c6, you pin it. If they play bishop to c5, you simply win time, so they'll play bishop to e7 instead, but then you play d4 anyways, you go knight to e2, you can play bishop d3, eventually castle, and you reach these positions where you're going to have a lot of pieces aimed at their king, and you have this open f-file, and a lot of pieces here, and you have these two bishops that are really powerful. They'll get some play as well with f6, trying to open up the f-file for them. So it kind of depends if you want to land in this position. Alternatively, you can play instead knight f3 here, which is actually a move that I prefer more. And now the idea is if they play something like knight takes, you take with the b pawn, and I mean here you continue very comfortably. Just normal developing moves, really. You can move it here, 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 your bishop here or here. You can castle. Totally easy position to play. You could even go, bishop a3 or bishop b2 in these positions as well, because you took with the b pawn. So that's something to consider as well. However, if they play bishop to g4 and pin your knight, then you can continue with d3, kicking away their knight. They develop their bishop. You take away the pin. You can target these weaknesses on b7. Then you can castle. And in this position, I mean, you're totally fine. You have some play here on both sides of the board. You have good pieces together, no real weaknesses. You have good, solid centers, center control. And then you can continue, of course, something like this, trade away the pieces, start to attack here, looking to swing over your queen. You can even do this really nice sacrifice and then get your pieces involved. And here I'll show you this really cool checkmating idea here, right? So you sacrifice your piece here, and then you get your rook in, you get your queen in. If they move their king, it's checkmate in one. So they block, you take. If they take back, of course, you take and mate them. So they have to move their king, but then bishop g7, they move, and bishop f6 is checkmate. So a really nice idea here, and just showing you how you can open up their position, because of your pieces here. Hopefully you learned from this video how to play the Vienna Gambit. Subscribe if you're new around here, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.